I should have known something was wrong the moment the plane descended through the clouds, and the world below looked like a blank sheet of paper. No roads, no lights, just white, and more white stretching to the horizon. Like the end of everything. I told myself it was beautiful. That silence meant peace, but my stomach twisted, as if the landscape were trying to warn me to turn back before I made a mistake I could never fix or forget again. Even the pilot stopped talking like he didn't want to wake whatever slept under us. That morning still, by the time the shuttle dropped me at the resort, the sky had darkened again. Even though it was barely noon, the sun hung behind layers of smoke. Colored clouds like a coin lost at the bottom of a lake. The lodge itself looked cozy from a distance, all timber and warm windows. But up close, the wood seemed weathered, splintered like it had been chewed by wind for years longer than advertised. And the parking lot was almost empty, which felt less like luxury and more like abandonment. Already, I hugged my coat tighter and walked toward the doors. Inside, the air smelled of pine cleaner and something older, like wet wool left too long in a closet. A single fireplace crackled near the front desk, but no one sat around it. The receptionist smiled with professional brightness, yet her eyes looked tired, ringed with purple shadows, as though she hadn't slept for days. She asked if I was checking in alone, and when I said yes, her fingers paused over the keyboard just a fraction too long before she handed me a keycard and a map drawn with shaking ink lines, like she didn't trust memory alone anymore. She mentioned the ski lifts would close early because of weather, and that most guests had canceled last minute, which was why my upgrade came free. I didn't remember asking for an upgrade, but I nodded anyway, pretending it was good luck. She slid a thin pamphlet across the counter with resort guidelines highlighted in yellow ink. Some were normal quiet hours, bare warnings, curfew. Others felt odd. Avoid walking alone after dark report. Unregistered visitors never open doors for anyone without staff badges, even if they seemed familiar or friendly. I laughed nervously and tucked it into my pocket. My cabin sat at the edge of a small cluster facing the tree line like a guard post watching the forest. The path crunched under my boots, each step too loud in the stillness, as if I were walking through an empty theater after closing. Lights glowed warm behind frosted windows, but no voices carried, no laughter, no music, just wind slipping between the walls, like someone testing every door handle. I unlocked mine, half expecting another guest to already be inside waiting, but found only fresh linens, a bottle of champagne, and 2 glasses, set for people, not one. I told myself the extra glass was just habit, left over from couples packages, but the sight of it made my chest tighten. I kept thinking about Savannah, about how she would have complained about the cold and stolen the window side of the bed. Missing her hurt, but it also felt strangely lighter, like breathing after a long dive. I opened the curtains, expecting a view of mountains. Instead, I saw trees packed so tight they looked painted together. And between their trunks, something dark shifted once, then stilled like a shadow, realizing it had been noticed by me. I shook it off, blaming fatigue from travel, and started unpacking my bag. The routine helped ground me, socks in drawers, toothbrush by the sink, jacket hung by the door. Normal things. Normal movements. The kind that prove you still exist. I tried the heater and it coughed to life after a few clicks, pushing out air that smelled faintly metallic like old coins. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through messages. None from her, just ads and weather alerts, warning of incoming storms lasting all weekend, which felt less like information and more like a sentence. Near evening, I walked back to the main lodge for dinner, hoping to see other people prove this trip wasn't a mistake. A few guests lingered around the bar, talking quietly, their voices muted like they didn't want to travel far. I recognized a middle-aged couple holding hands too tight, and two college kids taking pictures of everything for social media. Everyone smiled at me politely, yet no one started a conversation. It felt like being in a waiting room where patients pretend nothing hurts while watching the clock count down toward something none of us named out loud. The bartender poured me a whiskey without asking and said, "First night is always the hardest." I asked what he meant, but he just shrugged, wiping the counter with a cloth that left darker streaks behind, like it was already dirty. A radio played soft country music from the kitchen, and for a moment, the place felt almost normal. Then the power flickered twice long enough for everyone to freeze mid-sentence. When the lights returned, the bartender was staring past my shoulder toward the windows, like something outside had moved closer than before, watching us breathe together slowly. I followed his gaze, but saw only my reflection floating over the glass. What do you do? Enveloped him still. The feeling didn't leave, like standing on a frozen lake, knowing the ice might crack at any second. I finished the drink paid in cash and headed back to my cabin, telling myself tomorrow I'd ski explore, maybe even laugh at how dramatic I felt tonight. The path was darker now, and every cabin window looked like an unblinking eye. When mine came into view, the porch light was on, even though I swore I'd turned it off before leaving someone there inside. The porch light glowed wrong, like an infected bruise tonight. My hand hovered over the knob, as if expecting pain. I told myself cabins settle. Noises echo strangely through wood. Still, the silence pressed against my ears like deep water. I unlocked the door slowly, bracing for something waiting inside. Nothing moved except curtains stirring from heater breath across floor. The extra glass remained on counter, catching moonlight like accusation. I checked the bathroom mirror, half expecting face behind mine. My reflection looked thinner, older, like grief had eaten parts. Outside, wind scraped branches against walls, making a restless scratching. I remembered the receptionist warning about doors and unregistered visitors. The pamphlet crinkled in my pocket like a trapped insect. I spread it open, reading rules again under the lamp. Rule 3 said, report strangers, even if they seem harmless. Rule 4 said, never open doors for familiar voices alone. I laughed at the paranoia, then immediately wished I hadn't. The heater clicked off, leaving the room colder than expected. My breath fogged faintly inside, which made no sense now. I touched the window, and frost crawled outward from fingertip. Somewhere nearby, a door slammed, then another like distant gunfire. I stepped outside again, following the sound across brittle snow. The sky had darkened further, swallowing stars before they appeared. Every cabin window glowed except one at the very end. That empty cabin felt like a missing tooth and smile. I counted steps back, trying to calm my racing pulse. The forest line rustled softly. Though there was no wind, something moved between trees, too tall, too straight, too deliberate. I blinked, and it vanished, leaving only the impression behind. My phone buzzed suddenly, startling me with a delayed notification. The message showed no service, yet still delivered nothing back. Goosebumps crawled up my arms, like ants searching for sugar. I returned to the lodge, hoping people meant safety somehow. Inside, the music had stopped, leaving chairs pushed back abruptly. Glasses sat half full, as if guests evaporated mid-conversation. A fork clattered somewhere unseen, then rolled in slow circles. The bartender from earlier was gone, leaving only damp towels. I called hello twice, but my voice sounded swallowed whole. The fireplace still burned, yet gave off no warmth whatsoever. Shadows near the ceiling twitched like insects trapped behind glass. That was when I noticed footprints leading from outside inward. They were bare human prints, deep and wet despite cold. Each step ended abruptly, like the walker simply disappeared there. My stomach dropped as I followed them toward the hallway. The lights flickered above me, buzzing like angry hornets tonight. I smelled something sweet metallic, like pennies left in rain. A door ahead stood open, revealing darkness thicker than ink. My heart thudded loudly, certain someone else could hear it. I considered turning back, but pride pushed me forward anyway. Inside the hallway, air felt colder than outside, somehow still. A single bulb swung slowly, casting shadows that stretched unnaturally. At the far wall hung a map with pins everywhere. Each pin marked cabins like casualties on some quiet battlefield. Most pins Madouek clustered around mine, which made my throat tighten. I traced routes with my finger, noticing several ended abruptly. A small note beneath read, "Maintenance closed until further notice." That message felt outdated, yellowed edges curling like old skin. Something dripped nearby, echoing through the corridor with patient rhythm. I followed the sound, expecting a leak or broken pipe. Instead, I found a trail of water leading downward slowly. The basement door stood ajar, breathing cold air upward again. I hesitated, then descended steps, counting each creak carefully tonight. My flashlight beam jittered, painting walls with trembling yellow streaks. The dripping grew louder, like someone chewing with mouth open. A freezer unit hummed in the corner, rattling violently alone. Boxes stacked high were labeled supplies, yet smelled rotten inside. My foot slipped slightly on something slick and dark there. I crouched, touching the floor, realizing it wasn't water alone. It was blood, diluted thinly, still warm against my skin. Panic surged upward, clawing at my chest like trapped animal. Somewhere above, a laugh echoed high and brittle like glass. I whispered hello again, hating how small I sounded now. The laugh answered closer this time, accompanied by shuffling feet. I killed the flashlight instantly, hoping darkness might hide me. Breathing through my sleeve, I counted heartbeats like metronome ticks. The shuffling passed the doorway, then stopped directly outside still. I saw shadowed feet through the gap, unmoving for minutes. Finally, the steps retreated, leaving only the freezer hum behind. I forced myself upright and searched frantically for exit signs. The basement windows were boarded shut with fresh nails tight. My phone showed 1% battery, blinking like dying firefly. I typed a message to anyone describing everything fast now. No service returned yet, the send icon still spun hopelessly. Upstairs, something crashed, glass breaking, followed by distant cheering loudly. That sound wasn't panic. It sounded like celebration outside tonight. My skin prickled, remembering bartender staring toward windows earlier again. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring pain. Smoke seeped faintly from the kitchen, carrying a burnt smell. Chairs were overturned tables, shoved aside like something rushed through. On the counter lay wallets, keys, phones abandoned mid-moment. The front doors were chained from outside, securing everyone inside. I realized then we weren't guests. We were livestock tonight. The thought hit harder than any horror movie jump scare. Someone screamed far away. Then laughter swallowed it whole again. I grabbed a fire extinguisher, feeling ridiculous, yet desperate now. Footsteps raced toward me, faster, lighter, almost skipping playfully near. I ducked behind the bar, praying the counter concealed me. A woman passed humming tunelessly, dragging something heavy across tiles. The dragging left a wet line that smelled coppery strong. I finally understood the rules weren't for safety, but feeding. And somewhere outside, the snow kept falling soft and patient. I scrambled behind the bar for cover, feeling my fingers slip on the cold metal of the extinguisher. Every noise outside echoed through the empty lodge like a predator testing its prey. The laughter had stopped suddenly, replaced by whispers that seemed to crawl along the walls themselves. My breath came in sharp hisses, condensation forming ghostly clouds that lingered longer than the air around them. The fire alarm above me buzzed once and went silent, leaving an unnatural quiet that felt alive. I pressed my back into the counter, trying to ground myself in reality. But the room seemed to stretch and bend, shadows pooling unnaturally in corners where light should have been. A soft tapping started from the window behind me, faint at first, then growing louder, more deliberate, as if someone, or something, was tracing their fingers across the glass. I dared a glance. The snow outside was falling in almost impossible uniformity, covering footprints, masking movement. Yet, somehow, shapes were shifting between the trees, just at the edge of visibility. Tall, impossibly thin figures, with heads cocked sideways like curious birds, watching, waiting. I swallowed hard and told myself I was hallucinating. Overworked, cold, alone. That didn't stop the sensation of being observed from crawling into my skin. I moved silently toward the back exit, holding the extinguisher like a club, the metal cold and comforting in my grip. The hallway behind the lodge stretched longer than I remembered, or maybe my fear distorted perception. Doors lined the corridor, some ajar, some chained. Each shadow looked like a figure crouching, waiting. I slowed, trying to listen over the hammering of my heart. A faint rustle came from one of the kitchen doors. I froze, imagining someone, or something, lunging out at me. After a moment, the door rattled, and a stack of trays fell, clattering across the floor, echoing louder than necessary. I flinched back. Through the back exit, the night air hit me like a knife, icy and sharp. My legs trembled from adrenaline and exhaustion, but I forced them to move. The snow crunched underfoot, but the sound felt too loud, broadcasting my presence to whoever, or whatever, was watching. Shapes flitted across the tree line, darting with unnatural speed, disappearing, then reappearing, as if bending the laws of nature to follow my escape. I couldn't think logically. Survival had replaced everything else. The lodge loomed behind me, darkened windows now like vacant eyes, and I realized my fear wasn't just the figures. It was what they could do to others if I failed to get out. I sprinted blindly through the snow, the wind biting through layers of clothing, stealing breath from my lungs. The flashlight on my phone offered little more than a dim cone of yellow in the absolute black. I stumbled on hidden roots, rolled through drifts, scraping my knees, but I kept moving. Telling myself stopping meant certain death. The shapes kept pace just at the periphery of visibility, mocking, patient, almost toying with me. I wondered briefly if this was the same woman I had seen at the bar, the one the receptionist had warned about, but her dark eyes glimmered with a hunger I couldn't ignore. She led them, I realized. The others were followers. Hours, or maybe minutes. Later, I reached a small cluster of abandoned cabins along the slope. Their doors were chained, and their windows frosted over, lifeless. I ducked into one, slamming the door and jamming a chair against it. I crouched low, exhausted, the extinguisher trembling in my hands. Outside, laughter rose again, more chaotic, unhinged. Footsteps thumped around the building, circling, never breaking the rhythm. I could see shadows pass under the cracks of the door, silhouettes too perfect, too human, yet wrong. Every muscle in my body screamed to run, to move, but I forced myself to stay silent, to wait for a break I wasn't sure would come. From somewhere above, a window shattered. A faint voice called, sweet, calm, almost coaxing, promising warmth, safety, belonging. I shook my head violently, backing against the wall. I refused. Every logical part of my brain screamed that yielding would mean the end. The shadow stopped for a moment, as if testing my resolve, then advanced, moving like a tide of darkness pressing in from all sides. I realized then I wasn't just being chased. I was being studied, measured, evaluated. I could feel their collective attention like heat on my skin. I bolted through a side door, the snow immediately swallowing my tracks, as if helping them hide. Every step forward felt slower than reality, the cold burning through gloves and socks alike. The forest closed in around me, branches scratching, reaching, grasping. The ground sloped, dropping into a ravine I hadn't noticed on the map. I considered climbing down, knowing it was my only chance, but the ice underfoot made each move a gamble with gravity itself. Then I saw a light far below, a small camper van parked alone, its headlights off, but engine still warm. Salvation? Or another trap? I didn't have time to consider. Sliding down as carefully as I could, I reached the van and yanked the door open. Keys were in the ignition, a small sunflower keychain dangling mockingly. I climbed inside, slamming the door and fumbling with the gear shift. Outside, the figures paused, observing, patient. The woman appeared first at the passenger side, her dark eyes locked on mine, expressionless. I turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, and roared to life. Tires spun in the snow, throwing powder like smoke. I pressed the gas, jerking forward, and the woman let out a sound not quite human. A hiss and laugh blended. The forest blurred around me, the sound of pursuit muted by the roar of the engine. Every curve brought a glimpse of movement in the trees, flashes of pale faces, dark eyes, limbs bending in ways they shouldn't. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white. I felt the heat of fear suffocating me, adrenaline pumping like molten fire. The snow whipped past, striking my face, cutting, stinging, but I didn't care. All I could focus on was moving, surviving, escaping this nightmare that had erupted from what should have been a simple vacation. Behind me, faintly, I thought I heard cheering, the odd, joyous celebration of predators, satisfied with the hunt. My heart pounded so violently I could feel it in my ears. The first mile was agony, tires slipping on ice, the van groaning with age, but the distance felt necessary, life itself depending on it. My phone buzzed, 1% flashing. A message blinked across the screen. "We're watching!" I screamed, slamming the phone against the dashboard. The van swerved, narrowly missing a tree. Something outside, somewhere, was following, impossible to measure, faster than reality, yet tethered to me by some malicious force I couldn't comprehend. I raced into town finally, lights appearing in the distance. Emergency vehicles passed, sirens muted by distance, but the flashing lights seemed almost casual, like a performance. I stopped, catching my breath, trying to rationalize what had happened. Calls to police went unanswered at first, then through static and confused reception. The dispatcher claimed reports of arson and casualties, but no one matching the figures I saw had been recorded. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed the truth, leaving only echoes, shadows, and whispers. I realized then that this place, the resort, the forest, the snow itself, was a trap designed not just for me, but for anyone who lingered too long. And the woman, the leader, the orchestrator of chaos, was still out there, watching, waiting for the next unprepared visitor. That thought alone sent a shiver down my spine as I drove through the empty streets of town, headlights cutting through darkness, snowflakes glinting like distant stars, fragile and cold. No one would believe me, and perhaps that was the point. I didn't stop driving until the town disappeared behind me, swallowed by the endless white of the Alaskan wilderness. The van rattled and groaned under the weight of snow and fear, but I couldn't risk stopping. Every shadow in the rearview mirror made my chest tighten. Trees swayed unnaturally, their branches clawing at the night air, and I imagined those dark figures slipping between them, keeping pace without effort. Somewhere deep in the forest, I knew the woman and her followers were laughing, a hollow sound that seemed to vibrate through the snow itself, reaching into my bones. The road curved, and I saw signs of life. A small gas station blinking weakly against the darkness. I pulled in, tires crunching on frost-hardened gravel, and stumbled out, hands shaking, clutching the extinguisher still in the passenger seat. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered erratically. A lone attendant, hunched over a cup of coffee, looked up, eyes wide. You're from the resort?" he stammered. I nodded quickly, words failing me. It's happening," I managed to choke out. He froze, lips moving as if forming prayers in a language I didn't recognize. Then he slowly nodded toward a back room, muttering something about not looking outside, about keeping the doors closed. I didn't ask questions. I only drank deeply from the water fountain, letting the cold trickle down my throat, grounding me in the moment. I realized I was still shaking uncontrollably, knees weak, chest heaving. The wind outside moaned through the power lines like tortured spirits, a reminder that nothing was safe, that the forest and the snow were now enemies. I checked my phone. 1%. No signal. No chance to call for help. No proof that any of this had even happened. I sat on a folding chair, back against the wall, trying to reconstruct the sequence of events. But the chaos kept replaying in my head. Laughter, fire, dragging. Eyes that didn't blink. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had become irrelevant. Each sound outside made my heart leap. The wind brushing against metal, a car door slamming in the distance, snow shifting as if someone, or something, had just crossed it. I had survived, yes, but only barely. The forest, the resort, the snow, and the dark-eyed woman were still out there, still watching, waiting. I understood then that escaping wasn't enough. The memory would hunt me, invade my dreams, and return me to the lodge in my mind every time I closed my eyes. When dawn finally broke, it was pale and weak, sunlight struggling through clouds heavy with snow. I drove slowly, exhausted, toward the nearest highway, keeping my eyes constantly scanning tree lines, the edges of cabins, any hint of movement. The world seemed too quiet, too sterile after the horrors of the night. Even the forest, in daylight, didn't look natural. Shadows lingered longer than they should, and every shift of wind seemed deliberate, as if the world itself was aware of my presence and judging my every move. I finally reached the first town with actual signs of life. People moving purposefully about their day, unaware of what had unfolded in the mountains. I parked the van and got out, hands trembling. The cold now felt normal, bearable. But my mind didn't register relief. I could still see her eyes, still hear the laughter, still feel the presence of the figures that had chased me through snow and shadows. No one I spoke to believed me, and perhaps that was better. The lodge, the resort, and its horrors were mine alone to carry. I realized then that the true terror wasn't what I had seen. It was knowing that some things exist outside explanation, beyond law, beyond understanding, and that they are patient, enduring, and waiting for the next careless soul who thinks they can visit without consequence. I haven't returned, and I don't intend to. The snow falls every year. The resort remains. And somewhere out there, the woman and her followers watch the silent roads and the endless trees. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, when I hear a strange laugh or notice a shadow where there shouldn't be one, I swear I can see them, waiting, knowing I survived only because I ran, but smiling, because they always have more waiting for the next visitor.